Call the meeting to order. Cool. Well, then we'll call the meeting to order here at 5:03. Item A, Zoom meeting information. That looks like we were successful. Move on to roll call. Chair Seth, I am here. Vice Chair Ned.
Present.
Alder Randy.
Present.
Don't fly away on us. John is excused. Stephanie.
I'm here.
All right. And Amy.
Present.
And Corey.
Present.
All right. And Julia.
Yes.
And Mark is also excused. Moving on then to approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting. Is there a motion? By Randy. Seconded by?
I'll second.
By, I think Corey got that one. That was close. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, that is approved. Moving on then to approval from the minutes from November 17th of last year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
By Randy. Is there a second?
Second.
By Stephanie. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 All
Aye.
right, those opposed, say nay. All right, and that passes as well. So we'll move on to our one item of regular business tonight. For those of you that were involved in the commission in 2020, I think our very last in-person meeting before the pandemic, which seems like quite a long time ago, we did a similar exercise to begin to talk about some of our goals. So if you're able to pull this up and have it in front of you, that might be a little bit helpful. One moment. Here we go. So essentially, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to begin to discuss some of the overarching goals that we have as the commission, and then to start to plot some of the actions we want to take and really consider who is going to be involved, what work needs to happen, if there are dates for accomplishing certain things, identifying funding sources, additional documents, etc. So the purpose is to just make sure that we are having a focus as a commission, that we're all on the same page, that we have a shared mission, a shared direction. We're able to think about our capacity both as citizen volunteers and both to help council, the mayor, Melissa, and other city staff manage some of the priorities. And then I guess beyond that, we know, and I know in my experience, we can write the best plan and have the best goals, but there's always going to be new opportunities, new suggestions from council, from citizens that we might want to consider. So below kind of this grid matrix here is going to be some criteria for how we can consider taking on new issues outside of this initial planning meeting. I guess how I envision tonight's discussion going, I want to walk through, I guess, category by category and think about, spend really the bulk of the time focusing on what our goals should be for each category. I think this first bit here, some of the ongoing work on clean energy that John, Melissa, and Ned and myself have been working on is a good example for how to think about this matrix, this goals matrix. We have set, I think from our first meeting 3.5 years ago, we have been working towards 100% clean energy by 2050, both for the city and as the community at large. And that is both an ambitious, broad goal, but it's also specific and measurable. So it is kind of how we should be thinking of defining the goals for the further categories. And also perhaps we want to rephrase how we think about like climate resilience and water resources, for example, or ecological restoration pollinator working group. So I think it's very likely we're going to want to, especially with Mark not being here, we did have a conversation about some of the waste stuff. We'll want to have a discussion tonight and then maybe do a little bit of homework and come back and approve this at our next meeting. But that is essentially what I thought we could do tonight for planning, and go through the different columns: research, action, target, etc. for each of these categories. Also, this was just this matrix was put together kind of based on some of the work that's already happening. So tonight would be a really good opportunity to figure out if there are other things that we want, other categories outside of these four that we would like to consider as being a goal of the commission. With that, I'm just going to walk through kind of this clean energy example to both just give some fun updates and kind of, I guess, foreshadow Melissa's update later in the meeting on the climate action plan, but also kind of walk through the criteria for how we're going to set this up. So we've been working on clean energy as just kind of the broad-based category. We have set the goal by, resolution, mayoral proclamation, previous work plans of this kind of bifurcated goal of 100% clean energy by 2050 for the city operations and the community at large. The research and evidence that is helping us get to this goal has been the benchmarking of city energy use. We've partnered with NWTC. John and his students have done just tons of really, really great work to help us get a baseline of the city. And the next piece is doing that same baselining, but for the community as a whole. So I know that Melissa is working with WPS to get that information. And that's leading up to the big thing that is going to, this is the policy that is going to help us get to that goal. And that is developing a climate action plan. So I won't steal the exciting updates from Melissa, but that is really the big undertaking that will help us get to that goal. And the target date hopefully is going to be spring 2023 when that is complete. And what's wonderful about it are all of the different partners that are involved in that. And, honestly, this isn't even completely exhaustive, but the Green Bay Water Utility, Green Bay Transit are partners in this plan. Slipstream Consulting is helping with the development of the plan and the proposal. UW Green Bay, NWTC have been instrumental in providing student experience hours, providing expert information and work to help us get there. WPS, we can't talk about clean energy if we don't work with the energy utility. And then Oneida Nation as well has been really valuable and supportive of these goals. Funding sources, again, talking about some of those grants, state of Wisconsin has been doing that. Point people, John and myself have been spending a lot of time on it. This doesn't really, this doesn't mean that it is just limited to our work, though. This will be an entire undertaking. And we have had a renewable energy work plan that has been revisited by passed by the commission a couple of years ago, and a clean energy toolkit that helps advise local communities to figure out all of that stuff. So that's kind of where we're at with that. An example. I want to move on to the next category and actually kick it over to Julia to kind of help us center the water resources and climate resilience discussion. But do we have any questions on this format and what to expect for this discussion tonight? Excellent. And then any questions on the substance of the clean energy pieces there before we move on to the next thing, or any suggestions?
Can I just ask a clarifying question about the actions developing a climate action plan? That is very, very specific to the energy though, in general.
Yes.
Okay.
Julia,
Should it be-
also, besides energy, I mean, we should be looking and including also forestry components into that as well for carbon offsets.
So does
So
that mean
besides
kind of more
energy-
like,
So besides energy efficiency and renewable energy opportunities and policy changes and things along that line, as far as getting to the goal, we also need to include that as a component of reducing our carbon.
Could I maybe suggest then having it be like something like climate mitigation action plan? So it's, 'cause I guess a lot goes under an umbrella of climate action in general.
Yes, yes, it does. I don't know how,
That's fine. We know.
yeah,
it's
I'm
fine.
not prepared to like go into details at this point, because at this point it's a grant proposal.
Sure. That's fine. That was just a question, what it was specifically about, so.
Cool. Any other questions on the energy pieces here?
I think
go ahead, Ned.
in the energy, clean energy partners, I think we should add in the public schools. As I've kind of met with you and John less, I've met more and more with schools on this angle, and especially with Green Bay Public Schools, trying to get a plan going for the district.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
I just wanted to, I guess, mention or touch base kind of on, I think what Melissa was referencing is maybe like looking at a tree canopy policy or something as well as part of the action plan.
I would agree with that.
Definitely. I think that'll be a part of that greater umbrella. Cool. Other questions, thoughts, feedback on the energy piece here? Excellent. Great feedback. Thank you, folks. I'm going to kick it over to Julia then to kind of walk us through some of her thoughts on the resilience piece here, if that's all right. Julia?
Sure. Do you I mean, is it okay if I share my screen with the new stuff that I kind of came up with? Or should I just say it out loud?
I'm fine with that. Melissa, is that?
I mean, how
you-
do we transfer the information to?
Mhm. Melissa, is that, can we share,
You can share your screen, Julia. In the future, you need to submit it in advance, so it's included with the packet.
Well, it just came up from talking to Seth yesterday. So I don't know. So, I mean, what is the best way? I mean, this is just something that, I mean, if we had our organized thoughts coming into a conversation, what's the best way to get the information into this meeting officially? Like right now? I can just read
you
off
can
my
read-
answer.
Yeah, you can read it. You can read it.
I mean, I can also, okay. Because I personally don't find that helpful. So I guess I'll just start. The first thing I was going to propose is changing the category title to climate resilience and adaptation. And then have a goal of, this was just really initial brainstorming, but to say strengthen resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related hazards and natural disasters by 2030. And I took that language from the UN Sustainable Development Goals in general. And then I filled in some of the research column stuff, some quote, probably what's going to be homework for us. Looking at some of the research we could use is really to outline local climate changes, projections, and impacts. And then also identify social, economic, and environmental risks due to projected impacts, and then identify specific areas and residents at risk. In the actions category, you can see develop a flood resilience plan. I didn't know if we should add something about green infrastructure in there. Had that as a question mark. I started putting down partners, the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program, the East River Resilience Collaborative, Brown County. I just thought of one, but I'm forgetting it. And then a couple of our funders that came off the top of my head, but there's probably several more, including the Wisconsin Coastal Management Fund for Lake Michigan, federal sources, and a whole bunch more coming this direction through the infrastructure bill. So that's kind of what I had.
Do folks have questions about any of those things or additions? Randy, or are you just dancing?
Thank
Well,
goodness.
Yeah. When you came up with the date for the goal 2030, how did you come up with that? You think
That
that's
was the UN Sustainable Development
what was in
one.
that too?
And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good. Like, that's like less than 10 years. And, we should be helping people in the community become more adaptive by then, I would assume. So
I should hope. You certainly hope.
We're doing that. I mean, we're starting to really do that work now. So I thought it seemed like reasonable. And it's modeled off of something that, aligns with bigger goals and aspirations globally.
Okay. Because I noticed sometimes at council, some alders get very anxious and objectionable when we put dates on goals, and I don't know why. They could never really explain that to me that I could understand, but I think it's a good thing to do. There's certainly, we want to have targets. So if it comes up, I'll address it.
I mean, for that one, we could just be I think what would have to change is either, the goal does drop the date and it's a little bit more nebulous.
Right.
And then, or we make things that are a little bit more specific and put dates with them too.
Oh.
I mean, it could be both, we could have this bigger goal and then kind of set some quote targets of whatever that are more specific. Under that, I think that could be a good idea, actually.
Okay.
Like targets, like thinking a little bit what adaptive capacity and climate resilience means for us, and then setting targets around that. So is it, getting people out of harm's way in terms of flooding in general, or is it heat, like making sure there's cooling centers, I don't know, something like that, making sure people are out of harm's way or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
The UN Sustainable Development ones are really focused on preventing deaths and relocation. And so they were a little bit probably more on that. Well, we'd have to look at how things are being impacted here, I guess, first. Without the research, we wouldn't really know what's really happening. But we could have other ones too, including like economic damage. I think that would be part of like assessing economic, social, and environmental risk.
I could interject a little bit if you'd like. Randy, you brought up some good points, and as far as the dates and things of that order. But one thing that's happened in the city of Green Bay is the flooding on the East River, and all the movement of folks, and we're looking to relocate folks like that. I think studying the floods that have happened over the last number of years and trying to figure out a good setup with public works and other departments, police, fire. That's kind of a localized thing, but we've had our share of floods over the years, and trying to mitigate that as much as possible by having a plan in place, working with all the departments. And I'm sure they're doing that right now, but I think that's important.
A lot of climate adaptation, like resilience planning, really starts with identifying risks and vulnerabilities within the community. And to some extent with the flooding, I've been working with Melissa to do that with staff. But there's other ones, and we definitely have a benefit in the state through the Wisconsin Initiative for Climate Change Impacts that we could probably get some more localized climate data for our area to really kind of assess what impacts in general we should be thinking about.
Okay.
So that was just a start, I guess. Throw it up there and see what sticks.
Awesome. I think this is a really well thought out way to approach some of the resilience and adaptations. I guess since we're going to come back to this next month, I have your notes written down, but did we have thoughts on kind of accepting this for the first draft and revisiting it next month, or did folks have any additions or changes that they wanted to raise right now while we're working through it?
I'm willing to help Julia with that if she needs any help.
Yay! That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's a great comment.
Cool. Great. Thank you, Julia. If there are no other thoughts, we'll move on to the next section. Ned, can I kick this over to you?
Hi. Thank you. Nice job, Julia. As Julia was talking, definitely helped me kind of organize my thoughts a little better as well. Looking at kind of our old grid, we had one thing dropped in there about in the ecological restoration area about establishing a no-mow May policy. That is something that we definitely looked at the last 2 years, decided pretty much against it. So I think we can probably remove that, but I think it can be addressed in a different way that I'll bring up in a little bit. So kind of for an overarching, oh, sorry, looks like Melissa, sorry.
Yeah, before you get too ahead of yourself there, Ned, last year, I don't remember which month it was, but it was referred to staff for the No-Mow May, referred to staff, and then it went through INS. So we are moving forward with it this May. That I don't know if you missed that meeting, but that's happening.
No, I was at that meeting. Can you refresh me though on what exactly that will look like? Because it's not going to be the city letting things grow on city land where we need to keep it cut.
That's why it still says establish a policy, because the finer details are still needing work, and your help with that would be appreciated.
Okay,
we've been talking with DePere. They did this last year as a pilot program, and we've already decided as staff to combine our efforts with DePere, because they had they learned some things, what worked, what didn't work. going in on buying yard signs together. Also really being able to add some educational component to it so that people understand what No Mow May is about. And also that even mowing less can
Right.
reap the benefits. It doesn't mean it goes crazy for a month, and if we have a heavy heavy rains in May and then we have hot weather, people are going to be really hard pressed to manage their lawn after that. And then it also puts Public Works in a difficult position for enforcement.
Yeah.
So we will have a registration process, that we do know.
Okay.
And people that want to opt into that will need to pick up a sign, or we'll have areas within the city where they can pick up a sign. So homemade signs don't count. They do need to register and pick up a sign.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you for doing that work following that meeting. Yeah, I think that I guess I was going to say more of a reduced mowing May or a slow mow May kind of thing like that. But yeah, that I think what you've worked on in between then and now sounds really good. I guess for maybe that could be part of like under the action column heading perhaps, and if like our goal in the ecological restoration area, I guess I would propose something a little more broad, but feel free anyone to respond. It's to create connected, productive, and safe habitat corridors in Green Bay's land, air, and water, and really setting a goal of 2030, again kind of with what a lot of us are looking at with energy and what Julia mentioned with the climate work and water, but kind of the overarching, like, why do we have this working group, why do we have this category? I think it's to have productive ecosystems within the city, and in all those areas of air, land, and water. So that being said, is it okay for me to move on into like some of the research and evidence that we might try to collect? Sorry, Melissa, go ahead.
Oh, you know what? Never lowered my hand.
Oh, okay. Maybe that was Julia. Did you have your hand up? Okay.
Yeah, I really like with your more overarching goal that you include air, land, and water. I really like that. I think for me, you could make the name of your category a little bit more better, like related to those things.
Sure.
Something that, I don't know. That's all. I think that was my, and then, yeah, you haven't got to the next categories, but there's like, because of the world I work in, like I have a laundry list of people that would be interested in helping you with those things, or that it could be partners in this area.
Excellent. I think that's where won't say a lot. I won't say a lot for the partners and funding sources at this point. But kind of, I agree with you. The name probably could be perhaps just ecological restoration, or something along those lines.
Well, I would encourage you to do something that really could like connect with everybody, like the community in a way. Land, air, and water, like those things, like people know what you're talking about, or environment. I don't know. Like just that's all I would encourage. Simpler language that's not so ecological restoration is a little specific and kind of technical. It doesn't sound like it to you maybe, but it is. So
no, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Like healthy habitats and water and clean water or something. I don't know. I actually liked where you were going with the connected corridors too.
Yeah.
So connecting, land, I don't know.
Well,
just something that like rolls off the tongue.
I love the word corridor, so I do throw that in a lot of stuff. Habitat corridors could be, kind of the theme of this is habitat corridor. So, I'm happy doing that or leaving it how it is. but I think you're right. I think it probably could use a little less jargon in the name.
Wildlife is always a popular word.
Could we put wildlife corridors or habit? We could just put habitat, I guess.
I kind of like the idea of like land management or something too, because I think it's not just about the restoration aspect too. It's how are you managing your lands in, a sustainable or responsible way.
Could we call it
So-
land, air, and water? I'm fine with like land, air, and water, and leaving it at that.
Yes, I don't necessarily like the land, air, and water because I think we're kind of focusing on the water with the flood, and unless we're going to focus on air quality as part of, this group, I don't know if that makes sense to me, but.
Well,
Ned,
let
have
me-
you thought of an acronym maybe? Like when you said land, air, water, that's LAW, that's law. So I don't know if that,
There we go.
but just like an acronym that you'd have out there that, I don't know, just a thought.
Let me come back next month with an acronym or a cool name. I think that's a great idea. I don't want to hold everybody up on that, but I do agree with all of you. It should have a new name.
Ask your students.
I'll ask my kids. Yeah, okay. So I want to move into the research or evidence area for this kind of, habitat restoration type thing. I would like to create really solid maps of any restored habitat that we have or areas that we'd like to work on. So mapping is one. I'm going to get to the dark sky in a minute, and I do think a database of dark sky features is something that would be good to create. And that has to do with that safe air travel corridor for our birds at night. And then I really think part of this needs to be public outreach and creating some kind of public outreach infrastructure with the ability for us to connect with people, maintain records of conversations, let people know about work that's being done if they want to volunteer on something, or if they have a proposal to bring to us, and doing some outreach when it comes to some of this restoration work. Melissa.
Question. Would you put that in the action category? We're starting to talk about research or evidence,
Yeah.
and then you started going
So I
into the community outreach part of it.
Yeah, so I think the database would be the evidence, and then creating that database will be when we get to that action step. Creating mechanisms for that would be an action. And I was going to definitely touch on that as well in the
And
action
as
area.
far as the public engagement and public education, who do you see leading that?
I'll move into the action step now then. But the three research and evidence were the maps, databases, and some kind of records of public interaction with us. For the actions, going along with the first thing, which I said was mapping of the restored habitat, is creating a native plantings first, natives first ordinance or policy for the city when we do landscaping as a city. I'd like us to, I think that also would go along with reducing spraying and mowing where feasible. And I think that's where like some of that no mow may work can come into. Yeah, is your hand still up, Melissa? I'm sorry. No, okay. So the native planting ordinance, the dark sky ordinance is another action step I'd like to take. I've got timelines for all of these for the next column too. And then creating those pathways. The third one would be creating pathways for people in Green Bay to connect with us as a commission and to connect with each other around ecological restoration. So I'll pause there, and I think this is where I should pause and address Melissa's question about who's going to be in charge of creating those pathways. I don't know what they will look like, and I think it's going to involve some research and talking with other governmental groups or talking with other volunteer groups about what they think would be a good way to do this. Because I don't have the ultimate answer of what that should look like. I do know that we have some social media presence, but I also know that we haven't made use of it as much as we could. There could be surveys that we're putting out. We could be advertising events better. There are a lot of things that we could be doing to promote sustainability in the city. And I know that I do manage that Facebook page, so that's on me to do a better job of that. But maybe we need to create some guidelines around what goes on that Facebook page and what else we'd like to do digitally to connect with people. I'll stop there. Are there any thoughts or feedback on that part?
Yeah, Ned, I agree 100% that we ought to create pathways for the public to get involved. I think the area where I have a little dissonance is that should apply to more than just the habitat section. I think that should be an overarching goal of the commission for everything that we do, really. I know that will be by design part of the climate action plan. So perhaps we could think about, another category of just general commission principles and goals, whether that's on the grid or just like some guiding principles for our work.
Thanks for that feedback.
Ned, I had a question for you. You were talking about mapping. And I haven't been to many of these meetings, but I'm interested in what you folks are doing. And I'm just wondering, I was a map guy, research guy, for many years, and, getting the data out there. And what, there is GIS in the city, public works, there's different departments that use GIS and mapping. I'm just wondering what your thoughts were on that, or what you have found, or what you're hoping to get from that.
So talk about the Pollinator Corridor for a minute. That's a project we've worked on for the last 10 years or so, and created some just physical maps. But over the last few years, Bobby Webster, especially over at UWGB, worked on kind of a GIS version of it, and it's very cool. She did a nice job. What I would like to see us do to go forward is create a publicly accessible map where people could drop their own waypoints on it, drop their own pins, and say this is another restored area in the city, right? To make that more publicly accessible. So I don't know if that's something we can host as a city, or if that's something UWGB would host for us, possibly. But I do think we need to open it up a little more.
Well, I think utilizing the schools in the area are really important. Brown County has also done a lot of mapping throughout the county, and there may be things that you can tie in with your land records department and their planning department over there. There may be a number of layers that are already created. If you go to Brown Dog, it's called. If you type in Brown Dog and go to it, you can get a map of Brown County, and they have all different layers on there already. And you might be able to pick and choose what layers you'd like to have on or off. If you have questions with that, you can always get a hold of me. But that's something I've used quite a bit.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And then the other part of mapping would be to work with continue to work with DPW and parks to identify areas where we could remove some turf grass and restore it with some native plantings. Areas that aren't being used by people for sports activities and things. Okay, so that was kind of my three big actions. I think we can move that no mow May policy into the actions tab as well.
I
As
did.
far, sorry.
I moved it, Ned, into the action column.
Awesome. Thank you. And then as far as timeline, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's Corey. I guess I'm just still a little confused on the overriding goal for this group. So I don't know if you can maybe just clarify a little more.
Okay, so for the big goal, I tried to like tie these things together, right? Like, what does dark sky have to do with native plantings? What does it have to do with reducing spraying and mowing? And to me, like the overarching thing is that it's creating connected, safe habitat corridors, right? And it's all and at the same time improving the quality of our land, air, and water by reducing some of the more pollutive ways that we use our land.
I thought when you said that with the water piece, well, because you use the air and land as corridors, but I assumed you meant water as a corridor too,
Right. So water as well.
which would be a big water quality piece to me. So I hope that's part
Yeah.
of it.
And so I think like thinking about native plantings and thinking about restoring habitat, it just doesn't just happen on land, right? It also happens in our waters. So I think anything that goes along with like the native planting philosophy can apply to what we're doing in our wetlands in the city and what we're doing in our rivers along the bay shore, right? A lot of that work's being done, but I do think it fits in with creating healthy corridors to also look at what's going on under the surface of the water.
So could you say you're trying to create healthy habitats for like flora and fauna, and kind of the water quality and dark sky and everything comes along with it maybe, or?
Sure. As kind of the big goal, creating healthy habitats for flora and fauna. I like it. Okay, timelines. The dark sky ordinance. I talked with Mark a little bit in between meetings. Hopefully we'll have something ready by next month to share with you. And, you know, hopefully we can get it in the works, adopted by the end of the year. And like 2030 is again kind of the target date that I'm just pulling out as far as converting our skyscape to a dark sky as much as we can. There's nothing sacred about that date. It's just a date I put down. Yep, Melissa?
Clarifying question for the dark sky policy or ordinance, is this would be intended for City of Green Bay facilities and operations?
Well, I think it could be community wide. I think we start with city operations, but and street lights and things like that. But I do think that if you look at the ordinances around the state, they tend to be community wide.
My initial recommendation would be to start with city buildings and operations. I think that as the city, as you know, a community, we could be leading by example and doing this before it. I think it might be easier to get buy-in if we start internally first.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think if this is a priority for the Sustainability Commission to to get outside experts and other communities to help the commission along the way with bringing this forward.
Yeah, I'm typing that down about getting some help from outside. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. For the native plantings policy, I'd really like to introduce something again next month and get it to council by summertime, which would really help us plan more for 2023 plantings, probably. Unless Corey or anyone else here thinks there's something we could do on a faster timeline. But I'm assuming, you know, planning for landscaping and things like that is at least several months ahead of time.
I think plan for 2023 would be a good target date, because yes, we are kind of in the midst of selecting plants and things for projects this year.
Okay, great. As far as creating those mechanisms for people to communicate better with each other and with us on these issues, I'd like us, you know, maybe not just me, but certainly I'll put work into it to do some research during this first quarter of the year and bring it back for discussion maybe in May or June about how to best do community outreach. Thoughts on that one? And if it's bumping into something else that's already going on, please let me know. Great. Partners. I think there are a lot of granting organizations out there that can help with this kind of work. There's the Dark Sky organization. There's local restoration groups like the Wild Ones. You know, there are a whole lot of partners that we could work with over the course of doing this kind of work. Funding sources, again, grants. There's grants out there. Point people. I'd still like to be one, and Corey certainly has the expertise on the inside. I think she should be one too. Any questions, thoughts as we wrap that up?
I think a few good partners could be the Wild Ones. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they like to help.
Yep, I did mention them. The
I'm
Wild,
sorry.
yeah, that's okay. They're a fantastic group. So definitely the top of my list as well. Definitely.
Did you say that like a master gardeners?
No, I didn't. No, but definitely a great idea.
And then certainly, I think hopefully we're going to receive an Americorps grant for the Green Bay Conservation Corps. We're submitting our application in March, and I forget exactly when we find out if we get the funding, but our hope is we would be bringing members on board starting September of this year. So I definitely see the Americorps members. We've already talked about how we would be mapping, you know, areas of buckthorn and things like that. And I certainly think we could tie in that group along with this work group somehow.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
I'd add for partners for you, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and then also the DNR.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
There's also a like an umbrella group called the Green Bay Conservation Partners. So like I hope you should get on there. I'll put the website in the chat, and then you can say I would just suggest signing up for at least the listserv so you can kind of see who's on it. And check out their website.
Okay.
Because that's like the whole list of partners, potential people interested in the work you're doing. So
yeah. Glad you brought up the DNR. Melissa and I think have a meeting with them tomorrow. for some green infrastructure work we're doing with the school district and partnering on shared city and school parkland. So yeah, we're hopefully going to be getting some help from them soon. Yeah. Anything else anybody wanted to mention on this? Thanks for all the feedback. I appreciate it. And thanks for dealing with my 2 dogs and 3 kids that are making a lot of noise in the house.
I was hoping for more puppy cameos. That's the only thing disappointing about this segment.
I'll bring them up for a minute.
All right. Thank you, Ned, for that, and everybody for your feedback. Moving on to the last section here. So I had a conversation with Mark Walter last week about kind of walking us through some of these things. He's obviously not here today. I think that we can get, so taking all of these edits and the feedback and comments, we can get a version on the agenda, an updated version for next month. I almost said next week, next month to talk through, and we'll make sure we have some of what Mark was thinking of. But really quickly, I think where he was at is looking at, waste reduction as a whole. The biggest source of waste in the landfills is food waste. So by looking at either a drop-off compost site or perhaps a curbside pilot program could be a huge step in addressing that. So I don't know if folks had thoughts on goals right now, but I think I'd want to wait until Mark was here to walk through the rest, but I don't know if anybody had any reactions or questions related to that segment in particular.
There is somebody doing some curbside composting in town now, right? I believe I saw that just recently. Very small, but active group. I'm not sure who it is, but I think I don't know if it's brand new or what. I hadn't heard of it before, but it seems pretty cool.
Oh, cool. I'll make sure to relay that to Mark then, if that factors into his planning.
I think it's Greener Bay Compost. I don't know much about them, but I feel like it's a new thing.
Cool, sign me up. Other thoughts on the waste reduction here? Yeah, Randy.
It would now be a good time to talk about plastic bags.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, Melissa, what all happened? I see that the box is still out in City Hall for, are we making any, is it still working on possibly getting larger bins out in the public, available to the public 24/7 kind of thing?
No, not 24/7 and not in the public, just for the reason that there's so much trash that gets introduced when they are put in public locations like that.
Okay.
And the other reason being is they're almost every grocery store in Green Bay also offers plastic bag and plastic film recycling. Festival Foods, all the pick and saves, all the festival foods in town. I think Walmart does as well.
Oh, okay.
So there are a lot of outlets for folks to drop off their plastic bags and their plastic film. We are continuing the program into 2022. And Corey, the last update I heard was 1,800 pounds collected between June when it kicked off and the end of December.
Okay, and as far as at City Hall there, I noticed the box is still there. That got all squared away. We're not in trouble with the fire marshal anymore?
In all honesty, Randy, I forgot to follow up with the facility staff on that. But yes, they're still there.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, we are in compliance.
Okay. And I did make a pitch to the mayor and I believe Dan and even Steve. I haven't heard anything back yet about with the benches. If we could maybe want to do something like dedicate those benches to a certain civic, prominent civic members in the community or causes or whatever. And that could generate more publicity for the program and also offer more opportunities to educate the public on what can be collected and what can't. So I don't know if you've heard anything. I haven't yet.
I have not.
Okay, I'll poke them again. That's all I was curious about, the plastic bags.
Cool. Other thoughts on waste reduction? All right.
I came across an article recently, and I don't know all the details, but I believe California is now requiring people to recycle their food waste, or you get fined if you don't. I'm sure Mark knows more about it, but I guess just something I found very interesting. And I'm sure he can probably pull ideas and stuff from that. So just wanted to mention it.
Cool. I'll pass that along when I reconnect with him in the next week here. Other thoughts on waste reduction? All right, now next question for consideration, and wanting to be mindful of not taking on too much, having a focus and city staff capacity, and also the work that we can do. Are there categories that we are not that we don't have goals around that we should be considering in the next year? Or do we feel good about where we're at? And I would definitely defer to Melissa to help us be mindful of the capacity piece too.
I think this ties in, which is really just growing local food, more of it, and kind of food scarcity, but also that local food movement. And maybe looking more at trying to implement food forests and things like that. Right now, there has been a little bit of discussion in the city about that happening. And really strategizing for, I think community gardens that thrive and work. And so I guess that's one category that might be of interest.
Thanks, Corey. That was helping me. So I feel like there's a big category missing. Some of it can come under the climate resilience one, but there's just, I don't know if it's more of the social economic equity pieces, and food security is definitely one of them, and walkable, healthy communities. I don't know, something around that is what I'm trying to get at, really. But I think a lot of ours are the climate, some of them are very, environmentally focused. So, sustainability is more than just the environment. It has to do with our social and economic systems too. I like the food aspect. I don't know if it's part of a healthy communities or something like that, or that's part of it. Sorry, Melissa, I didn't mean to.
Oh, no, I was just going to say a couple of different things. So when, Corey, I think you mentioned community gardens and, growing our foods locally. My initial thought is a couple things. One, do we have staff resources for that? Do we have staff expertise to lead that? Or people within the Sustainability Commission that would lead that? And my second question is, or point is, that Brown County has a wonderful community garden program, and they have those sorts of experts on their staff. So I don't know what the city would provide in addition to that, that Brown County is not already providing to Green Bay. that Green Bay residents can utilize. And I don't want us to bite off more than we can chew as far as goals and priorities that we should be working on in this year. And then as far as Julia, what you mentioned, the city has an Equal Rights Commission. I have not been, it's fairly new. Mark, maybe you know more about that than, or Randy, as far as the topics that they address, but that might be a there might be overarching goals that the Equal Rights Commission is also looking at.
They had a meeting tonight and I wanted to sit in on that, but it was at 5 o'clock. So that you can look up the agenda. There was only one agenda item, but I think they were looking at an overall plan of sorts as well.
Mhm.
I wanted to throw something out to you, Melissa. What about the neighborhood associations? Have you gone out and gone to them? There's always some folks that get very interested in their neighborhoods and that might be a route to go to for different projects and initiatives.
Yes, to answer your question, yes. I have reached out to neighborhood associations for the flood resiliency, in particular, Joanne's neighborhood, the Joanne's Park neighborhood, and then the adjacent neighborhoods that border the river. So areas of Starlight and Astor East River, and is it Grove? Is it Oak Grove?
Oak Grove.
Yeah. So all of those neighborhoods have been, we did a community survey to those areas, to all the households that were impacted by the flood, as well as it's sort of it was an overall resilience and social connectiveness, and are you prepared? How do you prepare for upcoming disasters? Especially flooding. And we're in the process of going through the results now.
Okay.
So and working with Will Peters a lot, because he is the neighborhood staff member. So yes, we are definitely utilizing that as a resource, because it's a direct pathway for engagement.
Okay.
And to piggyback off of that too, within our first year as a commission, I did speak to the neighborhood association leadership council, and did talk about some of our initial goals and let them know basically that we exist. So that was a little while ago. Would definitely think that'd be a good thing to revisit soon though.
Well, if you go to the Equal Rights meeting tonight, there's a calendar of what they want to do this year, and it sounds like a lot of planning as well. There might be some things you could hook up with. They're talking about February of this year, public hearings featuring city administration and nonprofit experts. April and May, they're talking about public hearings featuring members of the community. And then they have September 1st deadline for recommendations. So you'd have to go over there and read that, but there might be some things there that might work with you as well.
I think that's a fantastic suggestion. Thanks, Elder Stoyer. I also, especially as my day job is in environmental policies and whatnot, I think every conservation or environmental or sustainability issue that we look at should be done through an equity lens. So I know that Ned had mentioned creating pathways for the public to get involved, mentioned social media and web presence and web updates, thinking about racial justice and equity. Perhaps we also want to just think about some general goals and principles for all of our things that we're working on. And those three come to mind in particular, but if there are any more that folks think of, either now or in the next couple of weeks before our next meeting, I think that might be good to have some of those just on paper as well. And then I think following up with the Equal Rights Commission is a great idea. I'm happy to do that. Ned?
To go along with what you were saying, what Mark is saying, a couple other folks here, I think a category that We could add, could be justice and access, and because we just obviously have people who deal with pollution, the effects of pollution, and also access insofar as how do we help them access resources if they need to, or connect with each other if that's their desire. So if we're looking to move maybe the idea that I had about, creating a mechanism for people to connect into a new category, and also address some of these things that we're talking about with, clean food access, pollution-free neighborhoods, justice, that could be a new category for that.
I was going to add one other thing too. For years, I had friends of mine and I over the years in the 90s. And so on Earth Day, we'd have groups of folks go out and clean up the river, clean up litter, different things like that. We have a trail in my district where we had 4 neighborhood associations come out and clean up a lot of the litter along there. And it kind of was a great exercise to kind of unite. So things on that order. I don't know if you folks do anything for Earth Day as well, but just a community event where you could get your voice out there a little bit. So just a comment.
There is a watershed cleanup. This year it's on May 3rd. They kept trying to have it on near Earth Day, but the weather ruined several years in a row. But I think, like, Ned, it would be nice to maybe have like a communications plan. I don't know, something about how do we all have access to a lot of these events and information that could go on social media. So what is the best way that our committee can filter things? Do we just all send stuff to you? That doesn't seem I don't know. That sounds weird. I don't know. If there's a better way, maybe that's the way, but to think through that, how we could be more publicly visible efficiently, I guess.
I'm fine with people sending me things. I think it'd be nice to come up with a criteria of what types of things we'd like to put out there. And if there's a list of items, like we want to make sure we post every meeting, or we want to make sure we post volunteer events, we want to make sure we let people know about this grant we're working, whatever it might be, some direction would help probably. We've posted for openings on the board. We posted for the resiliency coordinator job. But I think there's a lot of things that are kind of slipping through that we're not getting out there into the public.
I think these are all some really great suggestions and some great feedback. I think in terms of writing a plan during a meeting, I think if folks have individual suggestions, I think we should explore some of these ideas in the next month and then have those reflected in our next draft that we come back. So I'll take point on just making sure that I follow up individually with people on some of these pieces, and then we can make sure that we get a good draft for next meeting. Does that sound good to folks? I'm happy to reach out, but if folks want to reach out to me individually too, that is, and of course I'll be working in tandem with Melissa on that. Melissa?
One thing I was going to just mention to the group is I have been taking notes. They're not perfect. There was a lot of things obviously that Julia had and Ned had that I wasn't able to get everything in there. But what I'll do is, Seth, I'll send you the copy that I'm marking up. And then the minutes will be posted within a couple of days online. So the verbatim minutes will be there, as well as this recording. So, as far as being able to use that to unless you're going to follow up with everyone individually. So it will be there and it'll be publicly available.
Cool. That's great. I was taking a few notes too. So I think that sounds like a plan. Awesome. Fantastic discussion. I know that planning, especially via Zoom, can be, rival, a root canal. So this is a really good discussion. I think the last piece here is just meant to help us both stay on track, but also, be open to new ideas from folks in the community, which is really what our democracy is all about. So does anybody have any reactions to just some guiding questions if we get a proposal about like an idling policy or about a community idea or anything, good, bad, urgent, long-term? Did these questions make sense to help us identify how we can take on new issues?
Well, I know at council, and Randy can talk about this as well, but one of the alders brought up a policy of turning off your car when you're at a drive-through. And I think part of that, it might be good, but, I think there might be a lot of pushback. So, sometimes you have to look at issues and see if there's some legitimacy there. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just saying that there seemed to be some pushback on that. But that's just one example. But, at council, we get so many different directives from all different departments and things, and some of it crosses over to other departments, other citizen groups, et cetera. So I think we're open to that, to whatever comes forward. We'll take a look at it.
Mark, I think some of the pushback came from our commission on that, so don't worry.
Yeah. Mhm.
I wasn't there for that, so.
Yeah, as far as the questions, and I think they're fine. They help, but I mean, I think it's really hard to pinpoint. I mean, who knows what's going to come out of the blue? It's kind of hard to get ahead of that. I think we just got to take it as it comes and deal with it. And I think these are helpful, but I don't know that we're going to be able to cover every contingency. So I'm fine with them.
I think it's a really good framework for thinking about any individual issue that comes up. I like it.
Cool. Any
Yes,
other?
one suggestion, maybe do you want to point like a point value to some of those questions, like 1 through 5, like how well does it fit with our goals? If it's really high fits and then you add it together and it gets to a certain level, maybe then we discuss it as a commission, or some way, I guess, to have a determination from these questions, maybe.
I'd be open to what other folks think, but I tend to shy away from like having a really hard and fast like metric and rubric driven system. I think that it allows for, like Randy was saying, things kind of come as they do, and you can't really you can write the best criteria and then you're going to get a curveball that just breaks the window. So I think my intention was to have them be a little bit more open-ended so we could take things as they come and a more general framework. But that's my opinion. I'd be open to what other folks think about that.
I was going to say the same kind of thing. And I think in general, we need to address whatever comes up, even if it's, hopefully we won't spend much time with it if it's something that, just isn't going to fly anywhere. But I think it'd be, we should be open to addressing everything and just afford it the time it deserves and the attention it deserves. But I think if the public comes forward with something, I don't think we should put it on the shelf because we don't, it doesn't fit this or that criteria. I think that's part of the engagement we do. If someone comes forward with something, we take it on.
I think one of the problems that citizens have right now, each one of us represents 9,000 citizens in our districts, and having them feel engaged. A lot of times they don't understand the Zoom concept. They like to meet in person. I also tell citizens too that, a lot of folks think, well, there's nothing I can do. I'm just, who's going to listen to me? but I always say, you know, if you got an idea or something, you know, talk to your alder, talk to somebody at the city. There's always a good chance that we can get it onto a committee, you know, an agenda item. And many times some of those go through. So I've seen some successes from folks over the years. So I would encourage that, you know, to have citizens, you know, tell citizens that do it. You know, you know, we represent them, you know, they're our boss. So just encourage them.
Well said.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate what you've said, but I guess kind of what I was trying to get at was, you know, do some of these topics maybe make more sense with the Equal Rights Commission or something? And can this kind of help filter that to the right group? Or, you know, if it's super obvious, obviously, you know what I mean? It would make sense here, but I don't know. Just
I think that's a really good point, Corey. It kind of this got me thinking about how we used to have transportation as one of our categories in kind of our big framework. I thought we did at one point when we started out the commission. And maybe that has been taken over more by the bike pedestrian folks, or if you know what I'm saying, like we can still look at things from that angle, but like Corey is saying, you know, there are some newer groups as part of the city that maybe we are going to refer this stuff to instead of taking it on.
Perhaps that's another question we can add is, are we the best entity to take this on, or is there another committee or commission that's better suited?
I think a lot of that filters into the administration too. You know, I mean, as far as directing it to the right committee.
I was going to say the clerk's office pretty much
And
does
the
that. Because
clerk's office or
everything goes through the clerk's office. So they're the ones who will decide. And sometimes, you know, I've been part of where we say, well, maybe this really does belong over here instead, and we ship it over there. But it really needs to go through the clerk's office first, and they usually do a pretty good job of getting it to the right place.
That's great. I added on just my rough notes here to add to the questions of criteria. Are we the most appropriate entity to address this? Is there a committee, commission, or department better suited to address it? Other thoughts, feedback on this, or anything else overarching and some of the goals here? Most excellent. Thank you all for a great discussion. Looking forward to February when we can take it to the next step. So going back on my web browser. So do we want to, what would the most appropriate motion be, since this is regular business, to just motion to refer to staff?
I don't think it's ready for that because
Yeah, I think just a motion to hold. I'm sorry, a motion to hold.
Okay. All right. So is
You
that
get
a
unmuted.
motion? Is that a motion, Randy?
Yeah, a motion to hold.
I'm just
All right.
looking, Randy, at my choices for motions. And I don't see a motion to hold. I see received on place on file.
No, there's a motion to hold.
Okay.
Hold
Done it
until
many
February.
sometimes you'd have to put a date in there too, if hold till
Our next
a
meeting.
certain date.
February. Yeah.
Okay. So would that be February? I'm just looking at the calendar when the next commission meeting is.
Unless we think we need more time.
The 16th?
The 16th. So motion to hold until February 16th, then the matrix will be more in final format.
Cool. And that was a motion by Randy. Do we have a second?
Second. Ah.
All right. This is the best part of Zoom life. All right, second by Ned. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, can you tell me again who?
That was Randy
initiated?
and Ned.
Okay.
All right, and those in favor say aye or wag your tail.
Aye.
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 Say nay if opposed. All right, cool. That's passed. Thanks, everybody. Gotta love beginning of the year planning. We'll move on then to Resilience Coordinator update. Melissa, it's all you.
Okay. All right, well, hopefully not all of this will be redundant. But I am going to start off with updating where we're at with the code amendments for the green infrastructure project. So all of the proposed stormwater amendments and the zoning amendments for green infrastructure are in the appropriate format. And they are our next step now before this goes to a committee is we are going to do some public outreach. So we're in the midst of creating a brochure and a summary page that describes why the city undertook a green infrastructure code audit, and then a summary of the proposed changes in plain English so that the public can understand this, and when it goes to committee, it's very digestible. And that would be an accompanying piece to the full markups of the code amendments. So we're in the process of doing that, and we're hoping by the end of the month, we have those pieces ready so that we can send those out to stakeholders. Our plan right now is to email stakeholders and have a contact so that if they have comments in a comment period, they can get them back to us by a certain time. So that's exciting. That means we could potentially have this go to committee in February, March timeframe before it goes to council. Any questions on that before I move on to my next update? Okay. So the next one is the energy action plan, climate action plan. The name is, there's a lot of different names for it, but we recently, last Thursday, I submitted a grant proposal to the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. They have a division or an Office of Energy Innovation. And so this was a comprehensive energy planning grant for the city and community as a whole. And we had great feedback from the community, and got a variety of support letters, NWTC. As far as our cost share, we had partners pledge money. We had partners pledge in-kind hours. Very, very generous amounts of in-kind time were given from NWTC, from UWGB, and then also Sustainability Commission members like Seth and John as well. And as we go along in this process, we're not going to know until the beginning of March whether we get the grant. But I would anticipate more, I would hope that we can enlist your help as a commission with your input in that plan as well. The other support that we received was from, and I don't think she's on, Sister Sally. So the sisters pledged $1,000 for our energy plan. And we are so excited. We're so thankful. And so I just wanted to publicly mention that. And also the Wisconsin Public Service, they also committed to providing community-wide utility data to aid us in our plan, which is fantastic. That's not always an easy thing to get, depending on who your utility is. So we're very pleased with that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but if that grant goes through, it would begin in spring, so in March, and then go for 12 months. We also had generous support from Public Works with cash donation, not donation, but a cash match into that grant. The Green Bay Water Utility is also our collaborating partner with that, and they've also pledged $10,000 in the form of in-kind time as well as cash, and the same as Green Bay Metro. And that's our collaborative group. So I feel like we do have a very strong grant proposal. And then any questions on that?
I just wanted to make a comment about when it mentioned transit, Patty Kawitz, have you talked about advertising at all on buses, for anything?
No, we haven't. We haven't. That's a great idea.
They drive all over the place and there's ads and you can get, that could be some in-kind possibly. I don't know. But I would check with Patty and see if there's something.
Generally, they're using that as a source of revenue.
Normally.
Normally, yeah.
Well, maybe we get a cut rate, Randy. People.
Yeah, I'm on the commission.
Just a thought.
Yeah. And so lastly, the other thing that happened over the last couple of months, it started in October, but as a staff, we held flood resilience workshops as a staff, and we had, I think, about 7 or 8, at the beginning, about 7 or 8 different departments represented in this process. And this was led by Julia Nordyke and a few other people within the East River Resiliency Collaborative. But we really focused on all of Green Bay, not just East River Resiliency. And we had people from police, fire, public works, planners, transit, probably forgetting some other folks. And we held 2 virtual workshops, and then also a questionnaire survey went out to staff members as well to identify flood risks, what the impacts are, and then we ranked the different flood hazards. And Mark, Mr. Stoyer, you had mentioned this earlier as far as coming together across departments to create a resiliency plan and that's exactly the process that we're in. Is, not one department can do this all by themselves.
Right. Good point.
So, yeah, so that just wrapped up last week, right, Julia?
Yeah, almost 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Can you believe that?
I know. It was a big undertaking, actually.
I have some things to get to you. Yes.
So that's it. That's all I have for updates. We'll be working on No Mow May. There's always a million things to work on.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa, for starting 2022 on such a strong footing. Moving on then to work group updates. I think Melissa speaks for the clean energy work group. Great stuff happening with that plan. Any other work group updates today? And then hearing none, move on to just any other member updates, announcements, etc. Cool. Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Before I make that motion, I'd just like to thank the sisters. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sisters.
Yep. Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Second.
You're welcome.
Motion, yeah, your support is out of this world.
Yeah. All right.
That's for you, Randy.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Motion to adjourn by Randy and seconded by Julia. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed say nay. All right, the ayes have
Aye.
it. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.